Welcome and thank you all for joining us today for our online session in response to the COVID-19 crisis. My name is Raida Manam and I am a member of the IAVE team. We hope you're safe and healthy during these concerned times and always. As the coronavirus pandemic continues affecting our world, IAVE is committed to help volunteers and volunteer organizations deal with the challenges it presents. We have prepared a series of webinars and resources to help you best respond to the crisis. To learn more about these resources, please visit us at iave.org/COVID-19. IAVE strives to build an inclusive network, open to all individuals and organizations from all capacities and resources. Please visit us at iave.org/join now to learn more and follow us on social media. It is very important for us that you join us. We only become robust as an organization when we can share your stories. In the midst of the pandemic, governments have had a crucial role in enabling and supporting the response of volunteers, providing them with effective and secure ways to assist their communities. In this session, Yoann Kassi-Vivier, head of Reserve Civique, a program for the development of civic engagement policies to respond to COVID-19 in France, and Kirsty Peden, Community Engagement Manager at the Dumfries and Galloway Council in Scotland and a leading member of the South West Scotland response team to COVID-19, will share their experiences in shaping volunteering government programs to respond to the effect of the coronavirus. A couple of important announcements as we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in our COVID-19 response website. For questions, please type them in the question box and our moderator will convey them to our presenters. Let me start by introducing our moderator for today's session, James O'Brien. James is the Executive Coordinator of the International Forum for Volunteering in Development. Prior to joining Forum, he spent a decade in various roles with volunteering service overseas, most recently as a Volunteering for Development Leadership Advisor. He has served as the coordinator of the Volunteer Groups Alliance and chair of the post-2015 Volunteering Working Group, and worked with Better Care Network and Lumus on responsible volunteering. Thank you, James, for leading today's session, and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Raida, and thank you also to IAVE for hosting this webinar. It's a particularly important topic and a particularly timely one at this moment. I think all over the world we're seeing a rise in interest in volunteering and people stepping forward to volunteer, at the same time as we're seeing a rise in the need for and demand for volunteers. And we're also experiencing unique challenges that are facing both volunteers and the organisations that support them to achieve their mission. From travel restrictions to limitations on gatherings. At the same time as those challenges, I think we're also seeing opportunities, and there are opportunities that are coming from this crisis to think differently about how we work, to innovate, and to think about what volunteering looks like post-COVID. And at the heart of both the opportunities and the challenges are government, and they have a particularly important role at the moment in our COVID response and in the management of volunteers and ensuring the safety and security of volunteers in doing their work at this moment. And so we're very fortunate today to have two leaders from government on volunteering, two thought leaders who are also in many ways at the front line at the moment in coordinating and supporting volunteer response to COVID-19 in their respective countries. The first speaker we're going to hear from is Kirsty Peden. She's the Community Engagement Manager with Dumfries and Galloway Council, and she's a member of the team that's leading the community support and volunteer work in responding to COVID-19 in South West Scotland. And after Kirsty, we're going to hear from Yoann Kassi-Vivier. Yoann is the State Secretariat to the Minister of National Education and Youth, and he also has a mandate from the Ministry as an entrepreneur to lead Reserve Civique, which is a programme of the Digital Mission for the development of civil engagement policies to respond to COVID-19. So I'll hand over now to Kirsty for her presentation.
Okay. Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you, James, for the introduction. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen okay and hear me okay. I've had the pleasure of working with volunteers for over 20 years, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about Dumfries and Galloway Council's recent experience of supporting volunteers to respond to the effects of the coronavirus. First of all, a little context for those around the world that have not yet had a chance to visit the beautiful area of Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland. We are the third largest area, shown here in the dark blue on the map, covering 6,426 square kilometres, which is about 8% of the total land area of Scotland. Our population is around 150,000, which is only just a 2.8% share of the total population of Scotland. So we have a lot of land and we're a very rural area. Nearly half of all the people in Dumfries and Galloway live in communities of fewer than 3,000 people. And as you might suspect, our key economic industries, one of those is around agriculture, as well as the sort of creative industries, health and social care, and tourism and hospitality. One of the challenges we face, however, is that we have an ageing population and an increasingly ageing population, and of that population, certainly a high number do not have access to the internet. And that has been a fairly significant challenge for us in the past few months. An opportunity, however, is that we share boundaries for public services. So our health service, our local government area, our police, our fire services, and many of our voluntary agencies all work within the one boundary area. And of course, we have both active and strong sense of identity in our communities, with a very high level of volunteering happening in normal times, never mind during the current situation. So immediately before the 23rd of March, Dumfries and Galloway Council, which is made up of 43 elected councillors and around 3,000 staff who deliver those policies set by elected councillors, they established a community support cell as an integral part of its emergency response framework. And straight away, we recognised the need to work alongside the community to deal with the effects of the virus. This cell brought together staff who typically worked with communities, volunteers or individuals who experienced disadvantage from across a number of agencies. Led by the council, approximately 30 staff came together from different backgrounds and departments, from the voluntary sector, from the health service, and from a large social landlord. And my job has been to lead that cell, which has been a great honour. Our remit was to support the basic needs of those affected by COVID-19. So whilst we had a number of tasks to carry out to do that, there were two important approaches that have remained constant throughout our time together. The first I want to highlight is that it's been person-centred. So we worked closely with our social work colleagues who were identifying the needs of our most vulnerable citizens, those who were shielding, for example, who are self-isolating, or as the weeks passed, those who had little or no income. We know that 76% of those who were shielding, for example, did not actually need any support, although they were offered it. But for those who did need support, they needed things like their shopping collected, or just to have some sort of contact if they had no family or neighbours around them. And it's volunteers that have stood up to deliver those services. For others that had no means to buy food, they needed a food parcel or help to pay for their energy. And I'll talk to you a bit about how community organisations and volunteers have worked with us to respond to those needs. The second approach, as well as being person-centred, was that it was place-based, and we have tried to work at the most local level to support those individuals who need it. We have made connections between those who are in need and the established networks and infrastructure that were already in communities. Where existing and new organisations have popped up, then we have worked alongside them, providing them, for example, with extra volunteers or guidance on health and safety, basic things like ID badges, PPE equipment, and we've worked with those across the whole region. Our role has been to enable and support the voluntary sector and to get those in need of help matched with those who want to help and have been willing to help. Working together with the third sector interface, and that's an organisation that represents the views of all community organisations across the region at a strategic level with local government. We've worked alongside that voluntary organisation using their infrastructure to provide an online map at dgresilience.org.uk, and that map has over 300 organisations, community organisations that have stepped up to offer support and assistance to individuals in need. The map has had 10,000 unique visitors and 125,000 page views, and this has provided one opportunity for citizens to find help and support by themselves without any involvement from any organisation or agency. We've also benefited from the many active communities that we've got. We've got over 80 community councils, so that's at a very local level, often in a community of no more than 250 residents. And those community councils have stood up and become what we refer to as community resilience teams. So alongside our community resilience teams, there are also many other community organisations that were active pre-COVID, for example, in the arts, culture, leisure, sport or regeneration. And immediately once lockdown was announced, there was a real swift response, as I think we're seeing globally, by people who wanted to help. So we're currently working with 78 local resilience teams who are just helping their neighbours. They're doing dog walking, they're collecting shopping, they're often organising prescriptions or medicines to be collected, or things like grass cutting. As well as that, there are 19 community food providers who were all active pre-COVID, who we're giving extra assistance to, and they're putting out approximately 5,000 food parcels in a week, all packed, sourced and delivered by volunteers. And that's where our figure, we've had over 2,500 citizens come forward who want to and are willing to register with their third sector Dumfries and Galloway organisation, offering their time and skills and wanting to share them. Quite an overwhelming response, if I can say so. And actually, so far, only half of those people have actually been needed. So we've matched over 1,000 volunteers with either local resilience teams or individuals or food providing charities. And we've kept in touch with those who have offered their services, but we've not yet taken them up, just to keep them involved and keep them up to date as to why we haven't yet needed them. So signposting our volunteers and our volunteering organisations has been vital. We see our role, it's been around making connections, and supporting the voluntary organisations has been crucial from a local government perspective. We've provided financial resources, both for individual volunteer expenses, as well as information, advice and guidance. You know, it's been a scary time for organisations, and I think what we have been able to offer is a listening ear and a promise that we will find information out for groups and share that across organisations. Some organisations, particularly those that are food providers, are nervous that money just now is become available to them, but that perhaps not so much in the long term. And so we're working with them to prioritise how we use our resources for the long term, because their worry is that in the winter months, as the impacts of the virus is clearer on employment and poverty, that more people will be in need of food and energy costs. And so we're also working with organisations to support them to apply for national funds and to charitable sources, and just providing a bit of support to write bids and do that. In order to provide the best support to those that are working on the ground, it's been important for government agencies to communicate effectively with each other and to have trusting and respectful relationships, placing a value on the contribution of volunteers. This has not been a time to have an order of status. It's been a time for each organisation to bring its own skills and resources and to share them. And that's been a real benefit, I think, of the past 3 months. We have recognised the value of our voluntary contributions and our partners by filming or making short videos, encouraging them to share their good practice with each other and beyond. And I'll be sure to be letting them know that I've been singing their praises on a global stage this afternoon. So in summary, our local government's role has been to enable, to support and to empower our communities to influence decisions that affect them. Our response to COVID-19 has included enabling the sharing of our skills, our experience, our knowledge and resources, about connecting communities, citizens and service providers, and leading existing and establishing new partnerships where they have been needed. That's how I've seen our role, if you like, and probably to get out the way of in some respects of trying to reduce barriers for people to just get on and do things that they want to do in their communities. We've put a lot of emphasis on communication and communicating information openly and simply and quickly, and also prioritising with community organisations the resources that are available for those most in need. I think we were doing all of these things to a certain extent pre-COVID, and we have been on a journey for a number of years in Dumfries and Galloway about making best use of the assets within communities. But I've no doubt that the state of emergency that we're in just now has allowed that to happen faster because of the willingness of people to support each other at this time. So our opportunities moving forward. What's next? Well, if there's anything that I've learned in the past few months, it's that it will continue to change on a daily or weekly basis, and that people will continue to need and to offer support to help. So our plan is to reflect on the learning and the practice over the past 3 months to inform our restart and our recovery phase. And the highlights that stand out to me are the willingness of citizens and communities and the need for governments to get out of their way and let them respond to local issues. Let them decide as far as possible how to solve the problems in a democratic way alongside their partners. That way, we need to constantly communicate. We need to keep sharing information, sharing our understanding and maintaining a trustful and respect relationship. And we need to work together to identify what legacy of COVID-19 we want to have and how that influences our organisation's future plans, priorities and policies to build back better. Thank you for listening to our experience so far in Dumfries and Galloway, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So, hi everyone, I'm Yohan from France. Sorry for my accent. I will talk to you a little bit about the public policies facing COVID-19 in France. First, to introduce myself, I've been working in the volunteering sector for the past 10 years. I co-founded a non-profit organization called Pro Bono Lab to promote pro bono and skill-based volunteering in France. Now I work with the Ministry of Education, and I have a specific mission from the Secretary of State, Gabriel Attal. He asked me to develop applications to support civic engagement, including the National Service and Reserve Civique in France. There are 3 major government websites that have been used during the lockdown. One dedicated to health measures, another one on jobs and economy, and a third one on promoting volunteering, which is called Reserve Civique. This website is one of the what we call products as a website that we develop inside a public startup because we're part of an incubator developing, let's say, digital native public policies. So the concept of Reserve Civique was born out of the pressing desires for French citizens to mobilize, to volunteer just after the terrorist attacks in Paris in 2015. So that was the beginning of a law which has been transformed into a website to connect volunteers, people that want to help, and public and non-profit organizations that need more people to help them on their mission. More and more citizens were eager to show their support to the city and to the state, and reaffirm their common values and show their unity facing terrorism. And we're quite happy that we managed to develop this website and experiment it during 3 years before having to face this emergency. So the digital platform has been tested from 2017, but officially launched during facing the COVID on March the 20th. It was quickly upgraded during the crisis to face different needs, and we launched different volunteering opportunities depending on what were the needs we were observing on French territories. So to explain you how it works, NGOs and public organizations needed more and more volunteers as their traditional base is made up of people that are over 60 and that were at risk. So they were having a lot of needs, but less resources to face those needs. And on the part of the public organizations, they were also facing a high demand, but were also impacted by working from home, which is not usual in France for the public servants. So they needed also more people and also volunteers for new services such as food delivery for vulnerable people, or phone checkups, or also some local solidarity intervention that they needed to be done. So cities have been very mobilized during the crisis, and Reserve Civique has been one of the tools they had to reach out with people and offer them a volunteering opportunity that matched their precise needs. And on the other part, many citizens found themselves working less and locked down at home and willing to use their free time to give help and support their community. So that's in this context that the platform matched the demand with the offer and tried to facilitate volunteering all over the country. It welcomed more than 1.7 million unique visitors in a few weeks, and 300,000 volunteers have subscribed. 4,000 nonprofit and public organizations have also subscribed to offer an opportunity to engage. And because it was very simple to use, very user-centric, it was quickly owned by the users, so quite a success. Missions were also posted on the platform directly by the organizations, which was easier and required less time from public servants to moderate and create the content. So once the organization has published an opportunity, for example, a lot of organizations asked people to do phone calls to sustain a social link with with older people. So a lot of French people during the lockdown just got on the call to be in touch with people that were alone. And for example, a lot of nonprofit organizations started this kind of volunteering. This was not their core activity, but asked by the government to help, they tried to offer volunteers this opportunity to help. And we had a lot of this kind of mission. Once the organizations published their mission, they were also approved by public servants. And once the organization is approved, they were free to publish whatever the mission they needed to staff. We also gathered a team of public servants, but also of pro bono consultants. So companies help us structure our Reserve Civique staff, and we were almost 50 people working on this project during 2 months of lockdown. And then we had other resources just to have stable team when all the pro bono consultants had to resume their work on May the 11th. So this was a very epic adventure. Just a few words on what Reserve Civique is not. So it does not replace public jobs or private platforms. It is meant as a very common tools accessible to anyone to boost volunteering effort. It is a major platform in France now because it has been seen a lot. The president talked about the platform, the prime minister tweeted about it, and so on and so on. So it generated a lot of traffic on the website, but it's only one of the platforms. In France, we have France Bénévolat, or also Tous Bénévoles. We have non-profits volunteering platforms, and the one of the government is really focused on facilitating access to volunteering so that everyone could possibly match an offer, and not only focus on the largest cities that already have their marketplace, but really have a tool to anyone. So this was important at the beginning of the project already. We really believe in the importance of cross-sector collaboration, and we think that the government has a possibility to invest in technology that could help all the social entrepreneurs, non-profit organizations, special ed organizations to benefit this technology, and also the traffic that we can have on a .gov to be sure that we have a public database, which is not the Reserve Civique, but we can have in common all the volunteering opportunities coming from Reserve Civique, but also coming from other organizations, and everyone could use this open source database of opportunities to distribute those offers on any territory in France. So this is a project behind what you can see on the website. So we're also working now on the fact that the Reserve Civique was facing COVID, specialized in volunteering opportunities that were very specific to this lockdown. So we had 8 missions, one on food, for example, one on phoning people to make sure everyone is okay, and so on. We have also a mission on helping public service to get back, and so on. But now we are also offering different kind of volunteering opportunities in 10 causes. So the goal is to show that anyone can help, and on any kind of cause that is useful to somebody else. So we try to sustain and renew engagement in the platform, having new services we offer, giving information on what's next, and also we're working on resilience by having people being engaged on a day-to-day basis. And we really believe that to have people, that a nation that is surviving this kind of events, we need to be a little bit engaged all day long, all the year, and not only when there is an emergency. So this is now our goal. It has really to transition from an emergency solution to a long-lasting platform that will distribute many volunteering opportunities to every citizen that want to help, whatever the age or whatever the part of France. What can I say more? Yes, it's also Reserve Civique is only one of the volunteering public policy that we have in France. It's like a part of a continuum from national service, which is also a new project at 16. And then we also have the Service Civique, which is much more like in the US, 6 to 12 month service for young citizens that are not paid, but they have an indemnity. And then we have Reserve Civique, which is a public policy addressing everyone. So from 16 without any limit on the age, and which is volunteering and not with no fee. So it's let's say more agile and less with less cost for the states, and can be used in every public cause we need. So it's really an important and major part of this continuum that can help people being committed to the community all their life, and not only for the youth, because we invested a lot on public policies for the youth, but now it's also time to build up public policies that help maintaining, sustaining engagement all over the age. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions. I hope you understood me right. And sorry again for the accent. It's been a long time and I haven't been working in English.
Thank you, Yoann, and thank you also, Kirsty, both of you for really outstanding presentations. I think huge credit is due to both of you for the work that you're doing as well, and to be wrong to just to move on without noting that you have sort of met this moment, and you've taken innovative approaches and really come up with great solutions to problems that have only emerged in the last few weeks. Although I'm sure for you it seems like longer, that you've been working on these since February or March of this year. I also want to thank you for taking the time. I know you're probably engulfed in all of this at the moment, so to take the time to step away from it and look at the bigger picture and to share your thoughts with us is hugely valuable. So thank you also for that. We have a question function on this platform, so we also have a good amount of time to take questions and to have an open discussion on some of the themes that have been raised in the two presentations. So please, if you can type your questions in the question box, I'll then relay them on to the speakers. But just to get the ball rolling, I have one simple question and I have one slightly more challenging question that struck me as I was listening to your presentations, and they're both for both of you. So the simple one to get the ball rolling is, how are you working to identify the needs of people in the community? I know, Kirsty, you talked about a person-centered approach. But how do you learn, or how do volunteers learn that somebody needs their shopping done, or somebody would appreciate a call from a volunteer? What does that process look like for each of you?
So for us, James, I suppose it's been a bit of a pulling together of all the agencies that involved. So we have a national phone number, a shielding line that the Scottish Government has promoted significantly across the country. And what we've got is a process whereby they have also been written to, individuals who are shielding have been written to by the government. And on that letter, they've been given a telephone line. And that telephone line, once they ring in from Dumfries and Galloway, brings them right into our sort of call centre. And our colleagues in social work are basically almost trying to assess all of the needs of that individual at that point. And we have set up very quickly referral processes, which means that where it's something that the community can respond to without any intervention from a government organisation, then that referral comes through our cell, which is actually through a kind of central mailbox, and we then act as the person who sends that on, because we have all of the connections with all of the voluntary agencies. And our primary partner in that is the third sector Dumfries and Galloway organisation, which exists to support voluntary organisations. So we're working hand in hand with them, and basically we pass the kind of need to them, and they have the trust and faith that it's been risk assessed, so that they know that person, you know, if it's for a cup of tea and a chat, as we call it, sometimes it might just be they need some company and some social interaction. Then they know that actually, you know, there's been somebody who's looked at that person's needs and think that's suitable for a volunteer to be able to take on that role. And the third sector Dumfries and Galloway organisation then match one of their registered volunteers who've said, I'm willing to help, with that person, and they make the connection. And ideally it's a local connection, where it's turned out in many cases to have been a neighbour or somebody in the same small community that they've matched together. So that's one way that we're trying to identify need. But because our resilience teams are so local and in such small communities, we're finding that people are naturally making contact with their neighbours or their local community shop or their local community organisation, and actually referring themselves. Many community councils or resilience teams are actually sending leaflets out to their neighbours and the people in their area, saying this is where you can go to for help or assistance. So there's many different methods that we're using, but always trying to be as local to that community as possible.
Thanks, Kirsty, and great to hear that duty of care piece, that there is a check along the way that's built into the process, so that's in place. Yoann, how does it work with the platform? Can an individual log on and say, I'd love to have a cup of tea with somebody? Or how do you identify your own needs, or how do you, as a central platform, identify the needs of people that might be served by volunteers? I think you're muted, Yoann.
Should work better now. Thank you. So Reserve Civique is a, let's say, B2C platform. It's not a C2C platform. So we have, on the one hand, we have public and non-profit organizations creating volunteering opportunities. So no individuals, but only organizations that should be moderated, validated by the state. And on the other part, we have volunteers who are individuals that are choosing and volunteering on those opportunities. So we do not have people showing by themselves and saying, hey, I need a phone call. We let that job to the organizations we're partnering with. So to scope the need and the priorities, we partnered with nonprofit organizations, quite large ones, that are also on the whole territory, and public services will work directly with populations to set priorities, especially during the lockdown, because a lot was forbidden, so we had to work on what was not and what was the priority. So that was the way we've done it, and now that we are much more unlocking down, we enabled on the platform any organization that have been okayed by the moderator, the public moderator, to write its own volunteering opportunities descriptions to make sure we match exactly with the precise need they have, need we may not know, so we let them explain it. That's all.
Thanks, Yoann. That's really clear. I'd encourage you to add your questions in the question box. I see we have one from George that we'll get to in a moment. But just before that, there's one in the chat box. And it's a sort of two connected questions. The first part is, how are you guys preparing to go back to, and it has in inverted commas, normal? And are these initiatives expected to continue after we've gone through the various stages of exiting lockdown and things are opening up again? And a sort of a question that's connected to that as well is that as we're seeing this resurgence in interest in volunteering, how are you thinking about how we maintain that and keep that momentum going and that interest in volunteering going beyond the current COVID pandemic? I'm not sure which of you wants to tackle that one first.
I can, if you want. So even if we're unlocking down in France, we're still preparing for a return of the pandemic. So this is not an option. We are also focusing on what do we do if we have more cases, if one region is very touched by the pandemic again. So this is not out of our mind. But on the other way, this is a very good question, because all the balance is to know, are we a website for just answering emergencies, or are we also facilitating, helping people to help each others, which is what says the law. The law says that we're there to connect an offer and a demand of in the solidarity sector. And of course, when we're facing a crisis, it's people look to the state looking for solutions. So this website will be knowing a great momentum each time we're facing an emergency. And to be sure that we maintain a level which will be lower of engagement on our website all year long, first, we try to have a lot of landing pages for every territory that want to own the project. So for example, we have a lot of towns in France, a lot of towns, like dozens of thousands of towns. So every town will be able to have its own landing page on the Reserve Civique to be sure they can promote something that looks like them. So first, to be there all the time, everywhere, we try to develop this kind of pages. And second, to be able to help people focus on what are the causes that aggregate the most energy of people, like, for example, protection of the nature, which is one of the major causes in France that people want to engage for. We make sure we have also landing pages presenting all the opportunities you can find to help this cause, to support this cause. So really dipping down into territories, giving the tool so that people can use it as they want, and also maintaining a high level of visibility on great public causes that need that visibility to really federate people and have people united against a problem we all have to overcome.
Thanks, Yoann. I think we've seen in other contexts where there have been huge mobilizations of volunteers, whether it's in response to natural disasters, perhaps, or big mobilizations around things like hosting the Olympics or World Cups, even that momentum has been able to be carried through. And in many cases, those governments have become strong advocates for volunteering as well, which has been a real benefit to our cause. Kirsty, the steps that you've taken in recent months, do you expect that they're going to last long after the pandemic?
Yes, I'm very confident that we'll continue on the approach we've got particularly because it was an approach we were taking before COVID, where we were working very closely with communities to look at their own assets, to look at the running of services in their area and to prioritise those. What COVID has done, unfortunately, is had to speed a lot of that up, and as Yohan and you have mentioned, we know that our communities were very resilient in times of emergency sort of weather, and they were used to dealing with snow or flooding, but what we weren't prepared for at all really was the pandemic. But I am confident that the approach we've taken will want to sustain, certainly over the longer term. And I think key to that is, as you've both spoken about, is maintaining that volunteering interest that has definitely increased significantly. And I think from a younger age range, or should I say from the middle age range perhaps, typically, certainly where we work in Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland, then maybe it's volunteering is particularly for younger people, and then often for parents. As a parent myself, I've got back into volunteering to get involved with the children's activities, and then often there seems to be a gap until more retirement age. But I think what we've seen come through is that volunteers have come forward from all ages, and we would want to encourage certainly those volunteers that have come forward to continue or to stay involved in community organisations moving forward, and we'll do our best to make sure that happens.
That's great, Kirsty. We have a question in the question box from George, and it concerns insurance for volunteers. Well, I'll read the question, but how are you able to get government involvement to support volunteer organisations, especially in the area of insurance for volunteers? This is indeed a challenge for Africa, and George is based in the Centre for Volunteerism and Social Transformation in Ghana. How have you, Hilary and Yoann, considered the question of liability around volunteer activities or providing insurance for especially increased number of volunteers in the current crisis? I think there's also probably a secondary question involved in this, which is around government support to civil society organisations that are engaged with volunteers, as opposed to direct government support for volunteering. So you guys might want to address that question as well. Do you want to have a shot at that one, Kirsty?
Sure. Just if I don't answer it, just come back to me here, George. So our insurance, our local council insurance insured community councillors. So those were people who were elected to represent their community, not on the sort of formal, well, they are part of the democratic structure at a very local level, but generally it's not a political appointment or hugely contested. But because those people are formally community councillors and registered with the local council, then we already insured them for the activities that they volunteered for. What we recognised very quickly is that they were carrying out other roles that they would not typically do, whether that was collecting shopping or delivering leaflets perhaps, or dog walking, grass cutting. And they were undertaking that in the name of a community resilience team. So we went to our council's insurer and we talked to them and we agreed what they could insure additional volunteers for. And we agreed a policy that we then purchased, and purchased it in the name of the third sector Dumfries and Galloway organisation. So we basically gifted that to a third sector organisation to act as the host person who would be responsible for the volunteers. And so all of our 2,500 volunteers that I mentioned are registered online with third sector Dumfries and Galloway, and that's who they are registered with. And the insurance policy is in the name of third sector Dumfries and Galloway. The role of government, or local government in my case, was to enable that to happen and to happen quickly. And we had a contact with an insurance provider that set that up within a matter of days. So that was the role. I think it's a crucial part of volunteering, is to make sure your volunteers are safe. And so it was something that was very important, and I know has given confidence to local volunteers that they are recognised and that they are protected and that they are, you know, formally acting on behalf of someone. So I think it is a critical part of volunteering to make sure they're safe.
Thanks, Kirsty. And obviously you're seeing that as part of your responsibility as local government to provide onto those volunteers, which is maybe something that might be helpful to George in his own conversations with government in Ghana. What was your approach to the question of insurance, Yoann? I think again you're muted, or you seem to be muted, Yoann.
Sorry. Concerning Reserve Civique, the platform does not take liability for what happens in real life. So we really just connect organizations that we agree have a place there with volunteers. So we ask the organization to handle with the insurance issues and responsibility they have mobilizing volunteers. So this is not the state that takes this responsibility. The state does it, or the towns, public services, when they welcome volunteers as beneficiaries of the policy, but not us as a platform.
That's interesting, Yoann. Thank you. We have a question also around recruitment and management of volunteers. I think as well as a lot of people volunteering for the first time during this pandemic, also a lot of people are managing volunteers and working with volunteers through their organizations for the first time. And sometimes that is underestimated, or people don't distinguish between the particular skills needed to manage volunteers versus managing staff, which is probably something that many of us in this call are familiar with. I'm wondering, I know, Kirsty, you mentioned around providing information and advice and guidance to the organizations that you're partnering with. What form does that take, or what kind of demands are you seeing from organizations that might be managing volunteers for the first time, or managing an influx of increased numbers of volunteers?
Mm-hmm. We're very lucky in that the third sector, so we commission a third sector Dumfries and Galloway as an independent voluntary organisation to be the experts in supporting the voluntary sector. And so it's our work with them that has supported individual organisations to manage the additional volunteers, because they're best at it. They were doing it pre-COVID, and they have the resources and skill sets to do that. So I think part of our response has been to leave people where they are, that's their role and that's what they're good at, then enable them as best we can. What we have done is certainly work alongside them to produce perhaps, say, guidance notes, or to update. Obviously there's been health and safety information, that type of thing, and to use any connections we've got, even if that's just our graphics team, where to print stuff and make stuff look good. We've certainly shared resources that way, but I certainly see that as something that third sector is good at already. I do know that some organisations have deliberately not chosen not to take additional volunteers because they are frightened of the need to then manage and induct and support new volunteers. So existing volunteers, perhaps the capacity of their organisations has not increased because they've been so busy doing what it is that they have set up to do, that they are not yet able to look beyond in the long term and think, actually, we're going to need to do this for a long time, so probably it is best we bring in new volunteers. So we struggled with that in the early weeks, but I would say organisations have been more open recently to the idea that let's bring some new people in, let's help you to do that, because you need a break and you need some time off, or to be able to rely on other people. And so I think that's taken time as the sort of the weeks have passed, but it's happening better now for us.
Thanks, Kirsty. I might put the same question then to Yoann. Are you providing any support through the platform for the management of volunteers, or does that come from some of the other pieces of the puzzle that you described in France? I'm not sure if we still have you there, Yoann, but perhaps.
Sorry. Yeah, I will let it open so we don't have this problem. But I was just saying I think it's very important to have human time to welcome, motivate, and also help people engage themselves in the organization. We do not provide this help as the government. We just have one people by departments. So we have 100 people potentially connecting with their users. So nonprofit organizations, public organizations, or also volunteers in their territory. But one people is not a lot, and they're not full-time. So we do not have the resources to help managing volunteers. We try to publicize resources that are produced by the nonprofit sector, by volunteering specialists. But I really think this is part of the reflection to have partnerships with people that are helping nonprofit organizations and obviously public establishment to receive volunteers and to welcome volunteers, because a lot of public organizations do not know how to do that. They don't have this culture of welcoming and working with volunteers. And concerning nonprofit organizations, when they're very small, they've been really like let's say it has been a challenge for them to handle the lot of volunteers that have been coming during the lockdown, because people had time, but they lack the organizational management resources to handle all this new operational model during the lockdown. And I think this is some improvement we can make on this kind of platform.
Thanks, Yoann. And we're just getting up towards the hour now, so I'm going to quickly wrap things up. I want to say a huge thank you both to Kirsty and to Yoann for taking the time. Again, you have obviously you've both developed responses to this current crisis that are managing to harness the power and the interest of volunteers, but to do so in a really impactful and a really responsible way that is taking consideration of the whole ecosystem that volunteers operate in. And as I say, I think you're both to be congratulated for that. Also to be congratulated for managing to sum it up in 10 or 15 minutes and for taking all of our questions. I also finally want to thank all of the participants for attending, for sharing your thoughts and your questions with the panelists, and IAVE for organising this webinar and indeed this series of webinars. And I'll hand back to Raida for a few housekeeping and final remarks. Thank you all very much.
And thank you, James, for leading this discussion, Kirsty and Yoann, for your time. It is also for us, it's very important to hear the perspective from all sectors and how they are answering to this pandemic, enabling volunteering in different ways. That's what we've tried to do with our webinars. We are reaching our 20th. We will have one tomorrow on the corporate response. And our last one of the session will be the case of Brazil, one of the countries that has been severely impacted. So thank you all for joining us. We invite you to check our past webinars, including the recording of this session in our website, iave.org/COVID-19. Please share with us your experiences, your concerns, and join our network. It is very important for us to hear from you, hear from what you're doing, and make IAVE more robust with your stories and your experiences. So thank you all very much. Have a good rest of the day, wherever you are. And and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.